In boarding school 1, we met Pete, pro windsurfer and skier who, like many pride males, assumed that snowboarding was a complete dawdle and had tried to teach himself. And eventually, after much pain and violence, and employing a style that was hardly born in the Royal Ballet School, he did learn to steer a jerky path down the easier slopes. However, his DIY technique left him so out of balance that his progress was short-lived, and so depressed was he with his lack of expertise that he was on the point of returning to what he knew. Until that was, he met blonde bombshell and daisy trainer Becky Malthouse, who, with the grace and power of a bounding gazelle, began to rebuild him. And following the progressions and exercises of the well-researched Daisy system, she showed him how to balance, steer, and use his edges. In fact, there wasn't a dry eye in the heights as our aging anti-hero found himself carving and even floating through the fluffy stuff, some of the time. So was that to be the end of a beautiful affair, or could there possibly be a sequel?
Well, thanks to the finest tuition from my mentor here, I went from public peace enemy #1 to carving, powder tracking superhero. Well, almost, in less than a week. In fact, I enjoyed it so much, I bought the silly hat and have come back for yet more abuse.
Once you can motor around the mountain, there are so many different avenues of snowboarding to explore. With the help of a few of my friends, we're going to throw Pete down a few of them.
Our road to trickery starts on the ground, and we show you a few of the things you can get up to on a flat piece.
With the sky as our target, we move into the fun park, where we check out the different types of ramp or hit, analysing what makes a good and bad one, before showing you the right and wrong way to start getting air. We then list and explain the vast repertoire of aerial moves that you can attempt once you have basic in-flight control and a cast-iron insurance.
And we finish up in the half-pipe, the tailor-made aerobatic arena. It's a daunting challenge, but we ease Pete in gently by showing him what it's made of. The etiquette of pipe riding, how to approach it in easy stages, before working up to various levels of insanity.
And on hand to demonstrate, elucidate and cajole, not only do we have the hugely experienced Becky Malthouse, 6 times national champion, Daisy trainer, top instructor, blah blah, but also former British freestyle champ and fellow trainer Neil McNabb. Supporting cast also includes instructors Marcus and Nelson, and the absolute icing on the cake, World Junior Half-Pipe Champion and Pro Boarder Jonas Hagström, who, as we shall see, seems to be exempt from those forces that pull normal folk back down to earth.
As you can see from the introduction, my route towards aerial stardom starts right here. Let's go.
Learning these tricks is going to be so much faster if your basic skills are up to scratch.
I think she'll be pleasantly surprised.
Let me be the judge of that.
As in all balanced sports, all that is positive stems from a good posture. Running in a straight line, this is what we're after. Stand with the weight evenly spread over both feet, upright, relaxed and loose in all your joints. Keep the upper body and hips parallel with the feet, and hold the arms away from the body with the hands over either end of the board. So how am I doing, Bex?
Not bad. Must have had a pretty good teacher, I reckon. Yes, the upper body must be relaxed, but so must the legs. To feel the edge and maintain board snow contact on uneven terrain, keep the legs loose and knees soft.
On to steering. And the key point is that you should steer a snowboard with the feet and legs, but not by swinging the upper body. And to make sure the legs are doing the work, try putting your hands on your hips or hugging your arms to your chest.
You help steer the board with a positive weight shift from the middle to the front foot and to the back foot. Here my hands mirror where my weight is. Across the slope it's in the middle on both feet equally. Shift it to the front foot to steer into the fall line, and onto the middle, and through to the back foot at the end of the turn.
Although a little camp-looking, using the hands to mirror the actions of the feet makes you think about the distinctive roles of the feet when you change edge. For the heel side turn, lift up the toes of the front foot to start the turn, and the toes of the back foot to finish the turn. For the toe turn, look upon your front foot as the accelerator and the back foot as the brake. So press down on the accelerator to accelerate into the fall line, and then press down on the brake pedal to turn through the fall line and slow down.
As you begin to carve the board, think about using the whole leg to steer. Try placing the hands on the knees, and then start the turn by pulling the knee in the direction you want to go.
Yeah, I'll go with that. Now, bad boarders jerk across the slope, whilst good boarders link their turns with an easy rhythm. And the way to improve is to exaggerate the up and down motion at the beginning and end of the turns, stretching up high to the count of 3 as you flatten the board off and run into the fall line, sinking right down to the count of 3 to finish the turn off. And the extra tip is that by reaching behind your boots, it forces you to get more weight over and therefore more grip from the heel edge. So Neil, what do you think is the key to good basic boarding?
If you watch a good snowboarder, they don't really use any of their upper body at all. Maybe their arms move a little bit when they lose the balance a little bit. And the better a snowboarder is, the less they'll have to move. Okay, and all their concentration is in the feet.
And Jonas, what would you say to most improvers?
Bend your knees. Well, lots of people are riding with stiff legs, and yeah, you have to be flexible to be one with the ground, you know.
Put it all together and the board should feel like an extension of the feet, so the subtlest shift of pressure is all that's needed to change direction. Now hang on. No. I may have come on a bit, but please don't use me as the model. That's better. Loose in every department, the upper body just following the board, positive early edge changes, attacking the slope with controlled speed and aggression. With these basic skills, the world of trickdom is indeed your oyster.
So this is the half pipe, is it? What a thing. Well, I'm ready for this freestyle now, I can tell you. So what's our first bit going to be? Whack up the top there and...
Pete, no way.
Why not?
Well, before you start killing yourself in the half pipe, we're going to learn some essential freestyle skills by doing some ground tricks.
All right then. Thank God for that. Now, I'm still not really sure why we're here, because I really did think that freestyle was all about jumps.
Well, it is, but these ground tricks are all about learning agility and versatility. You really want to feel like the board is part of you.
And we're going to start with the 360, yeah?
Yeah, have a look. In the sliding 360, because you're constantly having to change your edges to keep spinning, you become very sensitive to them and quickly learn how to control your board from a variety of angles. And that's a skill that will allow you to recover from all manner of crooked landings. You can of course spin any way you want, but it's easiest to start facing the slope, so you start and finish on your toe edge. The key to the 360 lies in one positive shift of weight. Make like a normal heel side turn, but keep the weight on the front foot until the back end is facing down the slope. Then weight the back foot and press down on the toes and change the edge and finish the turn off. Across the slope, bring the weight onto both feet again and continue on your way. Now what could be simpler?
It's not exactly advanced gymnastics, but I still contrive to make the only possible mistake. And halfway through, if you don't shift the weight to the back foot or downhill foot as it is now, you catch the inside edge and trip up.
Staying orientated is the key. This time I start by turning uphill from my heel side. It requires the same basic skill and shift of weight, and there was one tip that really helped, right Pete?
Absolutely. As a way to help you crack any trick which involves a spin or a twist, look in the direction where you want to end up, and the body just follows on.
Clockwise, anti-clockwise from your heel or toe side, starting and ending, going forwards or fakie, the variations are endless. Did I say fakie? Sorry, we haven't done that yet. Watch this space. You go into the nose slide from a heel edge side slip. To slide on the nose, you rock right over the front foot and lift up with the back foot. Perhaps not quite as easy as it first looks.
I'll say my attempts at leaning onto the nose just sent me into a screaming traverse. The teacher said I'd never manage it if I just sort of shrugged a shoulder over. No, I had to shift the hips right over the front foot as well. Not enough aggression, she hinted. Bit of a pussyfooting wimp, she said. I'll show her. Right, bit more speed. Hips right over. Now lift the back foot. And now we're really on the nose. Whoa!
Are you all right there, Pete?
I was going to mention this, and now seems as good a time as any. Learning tricks, you're going to fall, aren't you? Any tips to try and make me stay out of hospital?
Well, the obvious one is don't fall over. But there are a few things. Try not to put your hands down because your arms, they are quite prone to getting injured. Do try and lift the edge of the board off the snow so it doesn't catch and flip you over. And if you are going to fall, if it's inevitable, then just try and relax and roll with it.
Please tell me you're not going to make me practice all that.
I don't actually think I'm going to have to.
Well, I practiced it anyway. It is all too tempting to stick a hand down to break your fall, but you should aim to absorb the impact with the fleshier posterior and then quickly try to get the board over your head so you slide on your back with the edges well clear of trouble. How about a pro's eye view of the falling problem?
If I'm in the air, you stick your arm out, but you don't land on a straight arm, you land on a bent arm or something, and you try and absorb the blow into a roll, and roll out of it. And that's all you can do, really.
In all these runs, our stars are riding backwards, or fakie as it's known. And since every trick involving a 180 spin will leave you riding fakie, it's a pretty essential skill, whether you're in the pipe, the fun park, or like here on the piste. As I watched Bex demonstrate the art and noted sadly that she rode backwards with much more precision than I rode forwards, I assumed I just had to apply all the same rules, but just use the other feet. Right theory, but not so simple. You see, my body just wasn't programmed for that direction, and besides, everything was in the wrong place. And I don't think I made much of an impression.
Becky, not looking to make any excuses or anything, or maybe I'm just a little, but surely for tricks, wouldn't it make sense to move the bindings a little bit to the middle and for that fakie riding, to angle the back one a little bit further forward?
Well, you're not trying to learn to ride goofy. You're trying to learn to ride backwards with your all-round setup.
So knows the answer, but it did feel very uncomfortable, so what's the next step from here?
Well, it will feel weird because it's something completely new. We could try some garlands to help.
Okay.
And so it was back to square one to retrain the feet and body. Garlands allow you to practice that essential front foot to back foot weight transfer, but without changing edge and crossing the fall line. You use the front foot to steer down the hill, and the back foot to swing across the hill. And after a go on the toe and heel side, it was time to try and link some turns. I felt like a complete beginner again, and made many of the same mistakes. I was using the shoulders to turn, and was therefore oversteering and skidding. I was stiff, had no rhythm, and had to express my frustration to Bex that I felt completely unnatural on my unnatural side.
Well, I turned both ways, which was a massive improvement on my first effort, and the key tip was obviously getting the weight on my new front foot, but they're still very slidey.
Yeah, but you are making good basic turns now, which is great. The way to go on is exactly the same as when we were learning to ride forwards. We've got to get a bit more pressure on the back foot so that you can grip, and eventually aim to make the turns a bit carvier.
You care to demonstrate, please?
Okay.
Remember, it's by driving hard off the back foot at the end of the turn that you get the edge to grip. Soon you'll forget which is forward and which is back.
It is just a case of putting in the miles. Beck suggested that I spent a whole morning just riding fakie, and so soon I began to let the board run. I loosened up, used the edges, and just ignored the fact that my feet were at funny angles. Now hit me with some backwards tricks.
The half cab is a 180-degree spin, which combines a bit of everything we've done to date. There's a bit of a 360, a bit of a nose slide, and of course a bit of fakie riding. From your toe edge, start the rotation by turning the shoulder down the hill. If at the same time you make a big enough weight shift to the front foot, you'll pivot round on the nose. As you complete the 180, immediately transfer the weight to the new front foot and go into a fakie toe edge turn.
Fine rotation and commitment to the nose from the young apprentice, but if you keep the weight on the same foot, it's not so much a half cab as a spin with butt plant. Slower this time, with less brutishness and more awareness of where my weight is. What can I say?
Don't get carried away, Pete. That is just the beginning. One of the many progressions is to link your half cabs so that you're always on your toe edge. And on one side, you'll be doing the spin from fakie. Having got used to pivoting round, you can try jumping round. Jumping. Now there's a thought.
An ollie is a really useful trick to have in our repertoire. It's really quite simple, but it takes a bit of practice. All we're going to do is bend down and spring off the back of the board, up into the air, come central, and hopefully land on both feet.
Go on, show us then.
Okay.
Cool.
It's by bending the board and exploiting its spring that you get airborne. One more time. Slide the board forward so the nose rises and all the weight comes on the back foot to actually bend the board. Then as it straightens, spring off the tail, retract the board with both legs and land with the weight on both feet equally.
Hey, you have a go.
Right. Now here's a trick you can practice on the flat with a minimum impact risk. She's right, it does take practice.
Huge height.
Oh.
Okay, that was great for a jump, but it wasn't exactly an ollie. You've got to come and spring up off the back foot. And imagine you're doing it in slow motion.
Oh yeah, I was well back then.
Okay, that time you were a little bit too far on the back of the board. Okay, instead of landing on the front foot, see if you can land evenly on both feet. The timing's much better now. We can have a go on the move.
On the move, speed doesn't translate into height, so start on a shallow slope and control your speed and do as you did on the flat. Go into it too fast and you'll be worried about stopping before you've even taken off, which is why Pete has the handbrake on the moment he lands.
But to take the mind off all that, Beck gave us a target, a stick on the snow. Just one to begin with, then two. Then the bar went up a bit, and the incentive to actually jump over something makes you forget fear and operate instinctively. And it's that gradual build-up that soon let me aspire to the same giddy heights as the boys. Better stick to aspiring.
But the way to really test your board control on the flat is to get a little routine going. Even the simple tricks we've covered so far start to look pretty impressive when you add in a few variations and then link them all together at speed.
It's pretty good to learn to know your board and how it works, to do flat tricks, and because you will get a feeling pretty fast.
Well, personally, I'm off down the piste to look for some lumps to give my Ollies a bit of a lift. Piste tricks are fun, but top of the priority list, it's got to be jumping.
Pleasant.
Whoa! Well, you're right, there are some good jumps to be had on the piste when people aren't in the way. But from a technique point of view, I don't really feel I've come on because all the ramps were a little bit different. So when I got in the air, I was in a different angle. When I landed, of course, it was different. So I never really went for it and always had the handbrake on. And as for the bumps up there, I thought they'd be good to jump off, but you only get off one, you smack into the next, so it was all a bit of a nightmare, really.
To be honest, the best place to learn real jumping is in the fun park. Come on.
So what are we going to find here that we don't find on the piste?
Well, all these jumps have been especially made by the machines. The most important thing about the fun park is that it's a designated snowboarders area, so we're not going to create any danger by running into other slope users.
And I hope we'll find different size of jump for different standard boarders.
Yeah, we'll start with a little one.
Please tell me that this is not a little one.
Well, no, I was thinking of something a little bit more like that.
The Les Menuires Fun Park looked an altogether more friendly jumping area than my chosen Mogul Field. But the chaps were quick to point out that not every fun park is so lovingly crafted. So I grabbed Neil to tell me what makes a good and bad ramp.
So Neil, it's my first day in the park. I am up for it, but at the same time being a bit concerned about my fragile joints. So which of the jumps I should avoid and which should I go for?
Well, what you should be looking for is something with a nice takeoff and a nice landing. Very important that it has a good landing. So what we've constructed here is a miniature size mock-up of what we shouldn't be jumping off. So the first one here is an example of a bad jump where you've got a nice looking takeoff, which is very encouraging. So you shoot off there, but what they've neglected to make is a landing. So you've got a flat landing. Once you're in the air, you come down, bang. Even if you land on your feet, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, my knees ache looking at that one.
Yeah, so this is what we're not looking for. And believe it or not, you're sitting on the other one.
Oh. So what's the difference with this one?
This one's called a tabletop. It's got a big flat area on top that gives it the name. Okay, it's got a nice smooth takeoff, same as before. It's going to throw you up nicely into the air. It's quite wide, which is important so you don't go off the sides of it when you're doing your jumps. But the most important thing is the landing. Okay, this one's got a landing, whereas the other one was flat. So this is going to be a continuation of your momentum up over the top and then down the smooth slope to finish.
So this downslope is going to absorb my massive impact.
OK then, Pete, here we are. Our first jump. All I want you to do is take it nice and easy, just relax your legs, ride over it, keep the board straight as you land, and ride away smiling.
What, no big air and grabs then?
Nothing.
Oh, all right.
Unless you've spent your formative years in a skate park, jumping on a snowboard is quite an alien feeling to begin with, which is why with controlled speed you want to start by just riding straight over the jump, with no attempt yet to brush the sky. Typical bloke, despite simple instructions, he has to close his ears to reason and charge at it like a bull at a gate. I hope that hurt.
You are just not listening to me, are you, Pete?
No, miss.
Classic beginner's mistakes. You try and do it all at once, make the grab, you turn the board when you land. Remember what I said, run into it nice and smoothly, nice and relaxed, keep your legs soft, make sure the board's pointing forwards and just ride away.
Do you want me to do it again then, miss?
I think you'd better.
Hanging around the fun park and the Pete, you get to see some pretty violent acts committed by those who haven't got a Becky on hand to guide and restrain. My progress only began when I stopped trying to spring and just had a few goes at riding over the jump to give me the feeling of being balanced and straight on takeoff and landing. It's been a while since your first jump, Jonas, but do you have any tips for the apprentice flyer?
Well, jumping the first time, you should not just totally focus on the takeoff and the landing. Don't care about grabs or anything, just do the takeoff and bend your knees and like do an ollie, and make sure to not land on with stiff knees.
And Neil, what advice can you give someone who still feels uncomfortable with that sideways position in the air?
If you're hitting a jump and you're used to facing it forwards, then you're not at the level where you should be jumping yet. What you got to try and do is you got to try and get into your snowboarding so that you're snowboarding from your feet. And once you're snowboarding from your feet, your upper body will stand sideways because it's got to. If you turn your hips like this to the front, then you're going to adjust your weight over your feet and it brings the weight to the back foot. Now your front foot is your steering foot, so it's very important to keep the weight so you can move forwards and backwards. So the first thing to do is get used to just riding straight up it and straight down it. So you're used to going in a straight line over it and you're not getting into this habit of taking off and trying to stop straight away. The better you get at normal riding, the better you'll get at jumping too.
To get a bit of controlled altitude, you don't just spring up, you actually ollie the board off the jump. Crouch like a coiled spring, then stretch up so you spring off the tail. Then pull up the board so you land with soft legs and the weight on both feet equally.
The body language still oozes trepidation and the sentiment that if I was meant to fly, I would have been given wings, or at least a fitted body mattress. But after a flurry of brave-ish attempts and almost as many wipeouts, and having walked the equivalent of Mount Kilimanjaro, by late morning every sinew was crying for a break. But I was already in a different frame of mind.
Now, Bex has given me stacks of tips throughout the day, but in the end she's told me that the only way to improve really is to select an easy jump and just plug away at it. And she's right, because with every run at it, I've just extended my comfort zone until the end. I'm quite happy to be in the air!
And when you do feel stable in the air and your basic jumps are landing the right way up, that's when you can start to go for a few stylistic variations.
Aerial snowboarding does have the look of a pastime for young folk with an overblown sense of their own immortality.
However, adding style isn't just about hurling yourself off the biggest jump and then seeing what gives. Ooh, you all right, Marcus? It's about staying with a small jump and then building up slowly. Well, maybe not that slowly. Trying the simpler variations and gradually extending your comfort zone until throwing yourself off a minor precipice seems like quite a respectable thing to do. So, let's start grabbing. Aerial style starts with grabs, which describes the act of the front or back hand reaching for any part of the toe or heel edge. Each grab has an often bizarre name, and they range in trickiness from the relatively simple indie to the mildly outrageous double-handed rocket. Thanks for that, Jonas. Grabs are primarily about style, flair, showing off and extending yourself a bit. But they can also have a practical purpose and help you improve your basic jumping by giving you a focus and making you more compact and stable in the air. A little later on, we'll give you an extensive glossary of the major jumps, but we ease into the art with a couple of the more straightforward ones. The Indie is a good place to start. Go into a normal jump and reach down with the backhand to grab the toe edge between the legs.
You wouldn't call my first attempt at a grab an unmitigated success. You see, because I'm already thinking about reaching down towards my toes, I end up taking off from my heel edge. But you can't get any spring off your heels, so I just sort of slide into a heap. Becky told me to imagine how I'd spring without a board. When I sprung off my toes, I'm naturally more balanced, get a lot more height, and have time to make the grab. Well, more of a quick slap really, but not bad for a first attempt.
The mute is similar to the Indie, except that the front hand reaches for the toe edge. Reaching down with the front hand can send you into a nosedive, so throw the back arm back to keep you in balance.
Well, I avoided the nosedive and just about made contact, but I'm in fine shape to collapse onto my back again because I'd taken off of my heels. Now, thanks to Becky's vigorous instructions, I am slowly learning that nothing good happens unless you're balanced when you take off.
So the thing to do is, your last 2 or 3 metres, you want to be in balance, in a straight line, and very slightly on one edge or the other, because you know if you go on a flat board you can skate about a bit, okay, which you don't want when you're just about to launch into the air. Make all your adjustments beforehand, and then when you're happy with it and you're going on the right line, then that's when you just go straight, okay? And once you're going straight there, you side on like that, and then you can just squat down and you can move with both legs, you know? So you can make tiny last minute adjustments with your weight forwards and backwards.
For the method, you reach for your heel edge. At the top of the jump, the front hand grabs the edge between the feet. Feels scarier, eh, Pete?
I should Coco. As I reached for the heel edge, I felt sure I was going to land on my back, and so wimped out altogether.
What of worse? You see, as the grabs get trickier, so you have to be more supple in the air to stay in balance. That's better. And that's especially true of our next trick. The palmer is like the method, but bring the heel edge up to meet the hand, and then swing the board round to the front. Spring off the toes, really arch your back to stop yourself pitching forward, and use that back arm for balance.
Well, as the tricks got wilder and wackier, so did the terminology. And soon my mentors were commenting on the height and style of each other's stiffies and shifties, as well as the intricacies of their various salads and sandwiches. Well, lest you end up as confused as me, here, care of Becky and the chaps, is a jump glossary, including a recap of the basic ones and descriptions of the more advanced stunts and their bizarre titles.
A mute grab is that is if you're a regular rider, you grab with your left hand on your toe edge between your bindings. A method is when you grab with your left hand again, somewhere on your heel edge, either up here or between your bindings. In there, or you can also call it a nose bone actually, is when you take your right hand, instead of when you do a mute, you take your left hand and grab at the same place between your bindings on your toe edge. A tail grab is when you grab with your right hand down here in the tail, which is hidden in the snow right now, but you grab it and hold it until you land. A chicken salad is when you take your left hand and grab it between your legs on your heel edge. Roast beef is the same trick but with your right hand, between your legs and grab on the heel edge. Slow bear, that's one of my favorites actually. You take your left hand and grab on your toe edge. Crail is also one of my favorite tricks to do in the pipe. A very nice trick. You grab it on the same place as you do on the slob, but you take your right hand instead. You grab here. Stalefish is when you take your right hand and pull it behind your back and grab on your heel edge.
Now, stylistic variations of these tricks include the stiffy. achievable by both sexes, this dodgy prefix describes the act of straightening the legs as you make the grab, a mute in this case, before bending the knees for landing. In the shifty, you turn the board across the slope as you make the grab, another mute by Becky, and then straighten it out before landing. On to the spins, and the 360 is a complete horizontal aerial revolution. You have two spinning options. Front side is where your first move is to turn your front to the hill. And back side is where you start by turning your back to the hill, with an indie grab just for good measure. Now if you're wondering where and how to start doing these, well apparently in front side, because you turn your back on the landing area, you're rotating blind, and so it's harder. Whereas backside is a bit easier, because you turn to face the runway, and so stay orientated for longer. Even when I plucked up the courage to drop off the bigger jump, my heart, body and soul were still too close to the ground to give most of those tricks a realistic stab, for the moment anyway. But being in the presence of such wizardry did inspire me to keep climbing. One nifty and potentially achievable trick I saw Becky pulling off with her usual grace was a 180. But how do you go about approaching a new move?
Just accept that you're going to get hurt for a bit.
Yes, thanks Neil, got that. I'm used to pain. Next.
It's like a sequence in a magazine, but some of the pieces are missing, and you've got to build those up, you know. And however you do it, you can either do it by just keep practicing in the pipe, you know, until you get it right, or you can maybe take it to a trampoline or a swimming pool and try and do something that's going to be similar, just so you get used to doing that sort of movement. And then once you've got it, the movement sorted, you come back out onto the snow and give it a shot. But again, you got to pick good conditions for learning in. You know, it's got to be like good snow, so you know you're not going to kill yourself at the same time.
Well, we've got an easy jump, the snow's pretty soft, and better than a magazine, I've got my own real-life demonstrator. And watching her time and time again, I could see this was more or less a half cab, but done in the air. She initiates the rotation with her upper body, rotates as if doing a heel side turn, and then lands fakie slightly on her toe edge with her weight right in the middle of the board. Simple. Any more tips before I die, Jonas?
First of all, you have to be mentally prepared. You have to think about if you really know how to do the trick. And if you don't know, you should maybe watch a movie or read some magazines where they often have trick tips. But you should be, most of the time, you should be mentally prepared and know how to do it, and also make sure that you have a really good landing.
So here we go. Well, not even a 90 really, but even a half-cocked attempt like that helped me break down the psychological barrier, and number 2 could be attacked with a little more verve. Oh, fat lot of good it did me. Or did it?
The mistakes are as good for learning as the successes, and you learn by trial and error.
Well, that's a relief. And sure enough, with every attempt I got nearer and nearer, and still happy to accept pain, even nearer. But then, as I slipped into a routine of not quite making it, I had to suspect that I was perhaps doing something fundamentally wrong. And before failure became etched on my psyche and my Kevlar underwear finally gave way, I went back to consult the model. Becky had left me to get a good feel for the move before she offered the pointers that would end up making all the difference. Firstly, although I was rotating towards my heel side, she reminded me still to take off on my toes. And secondly, to help complete the rotation, she told me to throw my back arm forward, so I landed with both hands over the ends of the board. While checking out one of my earlier efforts, firstly you see that taking off on my heels, I get no spring, no height, therefore no time to spin. And perhaps being a bit afraid of landing fakie and pitching over the nose, I hang back and land on my back foot, shoulders facing down the slope on my heel edge, with my lead arm still behind my back. But then it happened. Suddenly, spontaneously, without a hint of stage direction, the crowd went wild. Do you mind if I see that again? Strong mental picture, committed practice, succinct pointers from the pro, and the job's a good one. Bring on the half pipe.
It's not till you get right down inside it that you realise how big and awesome the pipe is. I mean, these walls are like houses. And to be honest, I'm very glad you didn't send me down it the first day. So explain it to me.
Well, this flat bit is the bottom that you have to cross to get from side to side. This bit here, this smooth curve, is going to be the transition that takes you up onto the wall to the top bit, which is called the vert because it's supposed to be vertical. And then that flat line at the top is known as the coping.
And do you expect me to seriously turn on that bit there?
Well, I will do, but not at the moment. You can see it's really rough and rugged. We're going to have to wait for them to reshape.
You got a shovel?
No need for that.
All right.
Praise be to technology. This extraordinary machine, the pipe dragon as it's known, does the work of 1,000 shovels. Under the guidance of a skillful operator, this mechanical arm can carve each section of the wall to the desired shape. Needless to say that in a resort that doesn't have a dragon, any half-pipe will most likely be crude or just non-existent. The half-pipe seems to be a honeypot for good riders, and stepping for the first time into this talent zone, you can feel very much like the new kid in town bursting into the last chance saloon. Apart from the physical fear, there's also the mental worry of making a complete fool of yourself, getting in the way or just destroying it. So chaps, should I be here at all?
Again, everyone's had to start somewhere, you know, and a lot of the people sitting there will be beginners themselves. And if you drop in there and you're a beginner, it's probably going to inspire a few of the others to drop in as well. You know, a few people will be sitting there wishing they dared have a go. It's just getting yourself up and having a go. You know, that is the only way in there. If you wait around till the pipe's empty, it's going to be dark.
What about general pipe etiquette? I mean, how do you know when to go?
The etiquette's quite simple, really. You just stand at the top, and when you're ready to go, it's quite intimidating, really, when there's a lot of good riders. But just work your way to the front. Don't just sit in one spot. Work your way to the front, and when it's your go, you just say next, and you drop in and go. You know, and it is important. Don't just sit there and let everyone go and expect them to say you're next, because they won't do. You have to get there and say next, and off you go. And then it's your space, it's your pipe.
Well, feeling better already, I was gagging for a run at it. And sensing a wave of irresistible male impetuosity, Beck was quite happy to let me find a few things out for myself, secure in the knowledge that I'd soon come crawling for help.
That was scary. You know, I thought it was going to be like surfing a wave, but those walls are so steep that I got up and just felt like hanging on, didn't want to turn at all.
Well, it's like everything we do. We have to start at the beginning and build it up slowly. So we're going to do a couple of runs and just try turning on the transition without going too fast or too high. Okay, have a look.
No rush. Control your speed on the flat so you haven't got enough momentum to reach the vert. And then turn to face the way you want to go, which will help you just float around. Off you go then, mate. A little less ambition from Pete certainly helps, but although he's turning on the transition, the stiff legs reveal he's still a bit in awe, treating it more as a foe than as a friend. So, to loosen him up, we try a little bit of rocking and rolling. No turns, just rocking up the transition and then rolling down backwards, stretching the legs as you ride up the transition and bending them as you come down. Apart from improving his fakie riding, it's an exercise that injects a bit of rhythm and makes him bend and stretch in order to get the most out of the transition. Back into turning mode, and this leads to what we call pumping the transition. Bending as you climb and then stretch the legs against the wall so you begin to leave the snow and jump around. Bend at the bottom, stretch as you climb.
Having been led in gently, I was now beginning to enjoy the pipe and use it for its intended purpose. Look, massive air. Using soft legs to drive against the slope is the way forward, but although I'm trying to bend the knees, somehow it feels unnatural. I end up stiff and straight, especially on my toe side. And I was wondering if, I don't know, maybe my setup wasn't quite right. Neil's at the top, he'll know.
Well, Neil, I've got down. You've seen it. Go on, be brutal.
For your first go in the pipe, you were riding it quite nicely. You're riding up the transitions, turning really well. That's all that you can really expect to do on your first couple of runs. That's what you should be looking for. It looks like you've got a slight problem in the basic stance.
All right.
Okay, it's looking like your front leg's a bit straight.
Now, I did feel that, but it seemed just very difficult to bend it in the position I was in for some reason.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that'll make that happen. The reason that you need to bend it is so that you can get the weight over both feet and you can move forwards and backwards onto each foot individually.
Right.
Simple things that'll make that happen. One is your hip may be coming round like this. Okay, if your hip comes round, then it straightens the front leg and brings the weight onto the back leg. Okay, so that means you're steering too much with the upper body and the hip. The next thing that it could be is your high backs. You might have enough forwards lean on the high back, especially on your front foot.
Okay.
If you haven't got enough forward lean on there, that'll drop the hip back as well.
Okay, one thing I did notice with you and some of the other guys, that their angles are quite wide compared to mine on the bindings.
Yeah, the reason for that is that when you bend normally, even without your board, if you crouch down, it's easier if your knees spread outwards,
right.
Okay, rather than they come out together. So it's the reason that we have a lot of angle between the feet is just for that, so that when you bend, your knees actually bend over your feet here.
Right.
Okay, so that your knees are making a correct movement, and that's something that we need to look at on your setup too.
Open them up a little bit more, and that could help. Should we try that first?
Yeah, it could be. If we move the back foot back towards 0 degrees, and that'll bring the back knee bending over it, and that'll bring the hips back round quite a bit.
Let's give that a go.
Okay.
Like Becky, Neil looks totally at one with the pipe because his stance and his basic riding are so sound. He steers from the feet, uses his arms as little as possible. If you stop the action at any moment, you'll find him centred over his board with his knees over his feet in perfect position to bend.
Well, I've heeded Neil's tips. I've put the spoilers further forward. I've angled the back binding further back, so both feet are wider. Therefore, I should be able to bend the knees. If that doesn't work, then I've run out of excuses. Still, you better alert the emergency services right now. Next.
The improvement may not be blindingly apparent, however, it did immediately feel better. Thanks to the wider angles, I was less inhibited and at least was physically able to bend my knees, although I still seem a bit reluctant to do so. There's no doubt that as you reach for the higher levels where there's precious little room for error, choosing the right board and setup becomes ever more critical. And these guys have worked so much on their setups that the board looks to be a part of their bodies. Good a time as any to glean a few more setup tips. For example, do they use the same board no matter what they're doing on the mountain?
What I ride is this board. It's a 164 free ride board, and I ride it for everything. In the beginning, I used to swap about a lot, but now I've just settled onto one board and I ride it all the time. If it's really deep powder, then I'll move up a size to a 170, if you're riding in the high mountains or something. But this I ride in the park, in the pipe, in the powder, on the piste. No, it's pretty much suitable for everything.
I got one freestyle half-pipe park board that is about 159 centimeters, and for free riding, if it's lots of powder, I use, well, even 170 centimeters board, but around 65 somewhere. It's better so you don't get caught with your nose down in this.
But at least for the vastly contrasting demands of powder, piste and pipe, surely their actual setups must change.
Well, if I go free riding or go to a park or a half pipe, doesn't matter, I use the same setup all the time.
When I bend, I have quite a lot of angle between my feet, so if I was to go both ways, then I'll probably put on, I've got, say, 27 degrees difference between my feet. Now, I don't want to have minus 15 and plus 15, because I'm mainly going forwards, you know, and then that would be very restricting as well. So what I've done is I move this one round to naught, and then I move all my angle with my front foot. So I've still got that same amount of angle between my feet, but it's mainly in my front foot. Sometimes I'll move that back one, maybe. If it's really icy and I'm just going to ride a lot of park and pipe, and I want a really side-on feel to my riding, then I'll move my foot back a little bit. Okay, but not a lot. It'll pull your back knee back a little bit, and it opens out your stance. You're a bit more sideways. So it's quite good for taking off and doing spins, and for landing backwards and things like that, taking off backwards.
For a rider, it's like the stance should be something like your shoulders. So for me, I'm 180 180 centimeters. I have a stance that is about 54 centimeters. I got in front, I got 30, and back I got 9. But that's pretty much for freestyling though. Most people use around 20, between 20 25 in front, and maybe 0 to 6 rear. Basically, I have the stance that I have just because I have so big feet. So if I got more angle, I get less toe and heel drag, you know. My foot will not touch the ground that much.
A pipe veteran of one afternoon, and already I feel like one of the gang. Yeah, the pipe's a perfectly friendly place, and only as dangerous as you want to make it. Personally, I was happy to plug away more sedately. Progress for me would come from giving it a bit more each time, edging ever higher up those verts, and most importantly, sucking all the info I could from our exalted company. For example, Neil, what approach would you suggest for a first run down the pipe?
Just ride up the wall until you stop, and then drop back down. Ride up the wall till you stop, drop back down. Ride up the wall till you stop. You know, don't try and get out of the top or anything. Just get the feeling for the transition, and then do it a little bit more, and carry a little bit more speed. So you go a little bit further up, stop. And you'll start to feel a lightness at the top when you pause. And that's where you're starting to get up more towards the lip. And eventually, if you carry on doing that, you'll come up to the lip and you'll leave the ground naturally. Drop back in, you'll leave the ground naturally. And just keep building that up until you're starting to get a really good feel for it, and that's all you need to do.
Now let's talk turning. How is it that our guys just seem to float round and make the whole process look completely effortless?
When you leave the top there, you just hold that position. At first you probably don't do any grabs, just go out the top, hold that position and look back into the landing, okay? But not too soon, go straight out first, then look for the landing, and then you come back in. And as long as you look for the landing, your board will come around.
Next question. What's the trick to staying in control as you climb up the transition so you feel good about taking off?
As you hit the transition, you slightly flex and you just let it take you up, and you push against the wall so that it doesn't just compress you into it. And you try and what you're trying to do is keeping your hips an equal distance from the wall all the time, so that they're not going out the pipe and they're not coming in the pipe, they're just going straight up. So it's practice, and you just push really slightly until you leave the top.
On their front and backside turns, most of the good guys seem to go for grabs. Now, is that just showing off, or does it actually help you take up the right position?
When you go out the top, okay, what you're doing is you're sucking your legs up so that they stay in the same position. Because when you leave the lip, your legs are bent, okay? So you've got to keep your legs in that position so they come back in. So you kind of sucking your legs into your body a little bit. And as you do that, you throw your arms down because you're sucking everything up. So if you go for a grab, it's the same movement anyway. Yeah? So it can keep you more stable, and it gives a lot of people something to concentrate on.
With the memory still very fresh, I can categorically say that the classic beginner's mistake is that of wanting to hug the wall like a security blanket. So how do you break away from that?
Stop hugging the wall. The problem with beginners, I think, is that they turn too early on the wall. They're afraid to go all the way up. So that's what they have to practice, because if you turn on the wall, you easily stuck your tail into the wall, and then you will end up hugging it and slide down like this. But just try to go as straight up on the wall as possible and reach all the way up, and then try to turn in the air and not on the wall.
The pipe itself seems to be a living thing, changing shape by the minute as some people carve away at its wondrous curves and others just knock great lumps out of it. As the day wore on, I noted that Neil and Jonas would drop in from all sorts of bizarre places, changing their line so they could hit the best sections with the greatest speed. But is there a code as to where you should and shouldn't go?
Yeah, the more people that go in there, the transitions get a little bit battered, and you get like tracks in them, and then all you can do really is follow the tracks. But if you watch some of the other people riding, and watch the lines that they take, just try and follow those, because the good guys will always change to the better line, you know, throughout the day.
Yeah, the most damage beginners made is when they not make it all the way to the top, where they, as we said before, hug the wall and maybe scrape down the snow, and yeah, make a lot of harm to the pipe.
Yeah, bloody apprentice hooligans wrecking our pipe. It's no laughing matter, mate. Get back to those blue runs where you belong and let us pros get on with it. Some people tend to class the best snowboarder simply as the one who comes nearest to meeting his maker. But how do our pros judge a good performance and good style? Don't forget your gloves.
Well, style, I guess, is when you see that a rider really has control of what he's doing. If you see a rider doing a 720 or a backstep air without control, that's not style. When you see that he's really controlled his trick, that's what I call style.
If you watch a good snowboarder, they don't really use any of their upper body at all. Maybe their arms move a little bit when they lose the balance a little bit. And the better a snowboarder is, the less they'll have to move.
Snowboarding is my life. I'm in a snowboard high school where I can train regularly. At least I can ride 4 days a week, and I study about 2 or 3 days a week. To avoid injury, I train a lot my body. I go to the gym 3 times a week maybe and work out. Especially my stomach and my back muscles is very important. Also my legs. The good part of competition for me, I think, is meeting all my friends everywhere. Because when we're on the tour, we're all the time with friends, and we meet here and there. And if it's a good pipe, we always have fun together. And if you make a great result, that's fun also. The top riders nowadays are absolute professionals that train a lot. Not just snowboarding, they train physical training, and they run and they do weightlifting and all this. There's a lot of bullshit that people just go drinking and take drugs, but it won't work if you want to be a professional, that's for sure. For me, snowboarding is just a way of getting to see the world and meet friends and meet new people, see different cultures and stuff like that.
One of the most important things in snowboarding is to open your eyes to where you are riding and take it all in, and don't let anything stand in your way. You don't need to gain an attitude, and you don't need to like disrespect other people. You just do your own thing and love the mountains. Respect. You need to respect anything and respect the terrain that you're riding in.
Since leaving the World Cup circuit, I've spent some time developing a teaching system. Snowboarding used to be a sport where people thought they had to work it out for themselves, but more and more are discovering just how fast their progress can be with a little expert help. I mean, a week ago Pete hardly dared set foot in the pipe, and look at him now. Oh, come on, it's not that bad. Just imagine what he'd be like if he were 10 years younger.
Well, practice makes perfect and all that, but some of those avenues that Becky and her mates pushed me down may seem a little bit steep and gnarly early on, but I promise you the pain is worth it. Cool boarding.